the Russian Air Force has, over the last 10 years or so, really kind of enjoyed probing the airspace of the Baltic states, particularly by flying fighter jets very close to, and then sometimes even into their airspace, and hanging around for about 2 minutes. But this is slightly longer. This is 3 Russian MiG-31 planes that didn't respond to requests to turn around, flying around in Estonian airspace for 12 minutes. And for a fighter jet, that's a long time. The response from the Estonians has been basically to scramble fighter planes in response. Potentially this is, an act of brinkmanship by the Russian Federation, because 10 years ago, when Turkey was having its airspace violated by Russian planes, they responded simply by shooting it down. There are some calls from the Europeans to do that again if Moscow tries the same thing, which they've also, have seemed to have done by flying over the Baltic Sea with a reconnaissance plane that prompted these German fighters to scramble again to try and escort it outside of German airspace and into international airspace again.
And spell it out for us. Why might Putin be doing this again after what was, relatively a break from it?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's 2 reasons, really. One is to distract attention from the war in Ukraine by saying effectively the main threat is to NATO, but of course to sail close to the line of committing an act of war, but not quite getting there. And that would allow him, if in fact NATO decided to take action against Russian warplanes, to claim that NATO was the aggressor here, even though that of course would not be the case. If a plane comes into your military plane comes into your airspace, you're within your rights to shoot it down. And the second reason, I think, is that Putin wants to test the strength of NATO unity, particularly the extent to which the Trump White House is prepared to back a more robust stance against these types of Russian military incursions. And at the same time, I suppose, to see how far the European states in NATO are prepared to go.
And what might they have made of that so far, do you think?
Well, look, I mean, the Estonians have asked for NATO to meet under Article 4. That's short of Article 5. Article 5 is basically saying an attack has happened against you and that all the other members of NATO have to take action in response. This is more to discuss a security threat, and that meeting will happen. The Estonians have also, for the first time in the 34 years they've been in the UN, called a meeting for the United Nations Security Council. So predominantly it's a diplomatic response at the moment. And what we've heard out of the Trump White House is that Trump initially said to the Estonian episode that he didn't like it and didn't like it at all. When pressed more about the German scrambling of fighters to intercept this Russian reconnaissance plane over the Baltic Sea, he said yes, he might take action and he'd have to think about it. So I think perhaps to an extent this is if Putin thinks that by sort of probing like this, all he gets is diplomatic responses, that might in fact embolden him to try further things.
And that's going to really have to factor into these calculations being made by the NATO countries as to, what sort of response they will get from Putin.
That's right. I think there's been a tendency in the West to think that Russia and Putin is deterred by what would deter us, things like economic sanctions that would cause hardship and so forth. That's not really viewed by the Kremlin as a legitimate response. That in fact it's regarded as a green light, and typically really Putin only responds to military force with shows of military force from the other side, and unless the European countries and particularly the United States relationship can be effectively beefed up enough for them to take concerted action, then Putin will probably think that the West is effectively weak.